Mr. Deep Sani, good morning.
Good morning, my brother.
Yes, I'm sure you have been following our heated debate in the studio.
Yes.
The things we have been saying in the studio, sitting outside, give me your thoughts on all the arguments we are advancing in the studio.
Well, I joined you at the latter part, but you see, we need to draw a line between the crime being allegedly perpetrated and the operational protocol. You cannot merge the two. I no qualms whatsoever arresting criminals or making them to go through, your legal processes. But the manner in which it is done is always an issue, I have, especially with, these national security guys. I saw the video. And by the way, I hope you're talking about the
yes,
Chinese.
The same video.
I saw the video. Trust me, my brother, if you come to my house or my home dressed like this, I'll shoot at you without hesitation. You dress like an armed robber and claim to be an undercover operative. What is undercover about dressing like an armed robber? As a matter of fact, you would even be more undercover if you are uniformed with an AK-47 than dress in a hoodie with, what do we call it, with a mask on, holding an AK, coming into my home. I think you're an armed robber. I think the way they do it is always wrong. The usual process is you would gather intelligence through a chain of, informants. You do your own analysis, whether it is electronic or whether it is in person, whichever way, because there are definitely different ways of, gathering intelligence. Then, at the point of arrest, usually you can sanction the police to go and do that on your behalf. Okay? Whilst perhaps you provide security in the periphery without actually being noticed. Just recently, I was reading a course on security detail for VIPs, and I got to realize that apart from the security bubble in which the VIP is with his detail, there's another team that usually follows behind without anybody realizing that it's part of the security bubble. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to get them very much involved in this manner. And what shocked me most than any other thing is why they targeted the CCTV. Because from the information I have picked up, the national security guys had to switch off the CCTV. I thought rather they would need the CCTV more than any other person. They would need, I presume that at least you would allow it to record, so you might even use it as evidence if you are to prosecute them. So you see, the way they do their things is always a problem. And let me say this quickly, okay? Even Caleb Kuda, okay, when he went to take those pictures and video, he was wrong. It's a national security installation. It's not Makola Market. You can't just go anywhere and start taking pictures and videos, okay? But the way they handled it ended up by backfiring. I mean, they turned the tables upside down, and now everybody saw wrong in what they were doing. Meanwhile, they had the legitimacy to detain him and interrogate him. But, unfortunately, the manner in which they do things is
we need a bit of education. When we are talking about raids, are raids the same as arrests? If they are not, what's the protocol for conducting raids?
I didn't hear you.
I'm saying that we want to understand if there's a difference between a raid and then an arrest. If there is
a raid, okay, I get it.
Yes,
okay.
And then an arrest. If there is a difference between a swoop or a raid and then an arrest, what's the protocol for conducting a raid?
Well, a lot goes into raids. First of all, like I indicated initially, some intelligence will be sourced. Then, based on that intelligence, which by the way should be actionable, they are able to. There's a security word they use, but they are able to establish a profile of the targets. Okay, and they are also able to at the same time tell whether to use a SWAT team or just normal officers, depending on the dangers involved. For example, if you are raiding a hideout for kidnappers or armed robbers, obviously the likelihood they would have weapons is very high. Okay, but if you are raiding modern Ghana officers or City FM or a Happy FM, you don't expect to see them come with all guns blazing. Things don't happen that way. Raiding is all encompassing. Okay, maybe to retrieve critical information, to retrieve critical items, and possibly to make arrest. But arrest is quite, definite. It's not as generic as raid. It's to take into custody a suspect. You understand? So the two go hand in hand. That is why sometimes we hear about raid, Kasua, and about 300 people have been arrested. So it actually falls under a raid or a swoop.
Now, I want to understand, does a raid necessarily mean that operatives are not supposed to identify themselves?
Of course they are supposed to identify themselves. If you come knocking at my door in the thick of the night, I expect you, or even if it is daytime, I expect you to identify yourselves. Where are you coming from? I mean, sometimes you might even ask for warrants, you understand, before letting them in. But if you don't identify yourself, there's absolutely no way I would allow you. What if you are armed robbers? What if you are kidnappers? What if you are hitmen? They are supposed to identify themselves. My name is so and so. Perhaps even show an ID, just to be sure. You understand? You don't just walk up to anybody's residence and decide to raid without identification. No, things don't work that way in a modern democracy like ours.
Would you expect a full explanatory, statement from the National Security on this matter?
Well, the National Security has been in the news for all the wrong reasons lately. And considering how the fast-paced nature of this news item, which I must say has gotten a lot of media houses. You are there about, I think, 7th radio station I'm granting interview to this morning about the same matter. I think they need to put it to rest before it spreads more. I expect them to come out through the Ministry of Information, by the way, and tell us that, a raid was conducted yesterday, blah, 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 to arrest persons who have been engaged in this or that. Okay, if not, it only adds up to the calamity. A lot of Ghanaians are now beginning to see the National Security as a ragtag militia of some sort, made up of unqualified, unprofessional, illiterate, from all across the country. So I think they have a lot of mind-winning, heart-winning to do going into the future. And one of those ways is to clarify when things of this nature happen. I mean, national security is not a football match, so you don't usually expect a commentary all the way, because sometimes the information is so sensitive and they might want to, go or prove further. So if they give out the information, it compromises or throws the investigation off gear. But that notwithstanding, I think that based on what we have seen, the footage everybody has seen, the Ministry of Information should quickly come out with a release of some sort, so we all would get to understand what really happened. If not, mute. To be mute means consent, and the narrative would continue out there.
Now, my final question, if you engage me, has to do with the relevance of the national security. And forgive my appreciation of security matters, but I was thinking, hasn't the Ghana Armed Forces got, how do you call it, an intelligence unit of its own?
They have.
The Ghana Police Service also has, right?
Yes, they have.
The immigration has, right?
Yes, yes.
So all these institutions with intelligence units, these units cannot process the intelligence they gather and then report this matter to the ministries they are under. For instance, let's say Immigration, Ghana Police, the Interior Ministry is there, the Ghana Armed Forces, the Defense Ministry is there. So they report this intelligence to these ministries and then action is taken. Do we necessarily need the national security in terms of this?
That is a very, very intelligent question, to say the least. You see, this is a PhD thesis topic, I must say. The thing is, in the past, all these various intelligence, they do their own gathering and keep it to themselves like it's their pension pay slip. But when Nana came to power in 2017, one of the first was the National Security Minister, in line with the Security and Intelligence Agencies Act, who, by the way, is supposed to coordinate, okay, and be the central repository of all intelligence and security matters in the country. So all of these feeds into the National Security Ministry database. And for every country, there's always an internal security mechanism and an external one. I mean, Britain, MI5 is their BNI and MI6 is their research. Okay, US, FBI is their internal, CIA is their, what do you call it, external. Israel, Shin Bet is their internal, Mossad is their external. It's an arrangement that should exist. So their very core function is to gather intelligence and, of course, to engage in what we call counterintelligence, which, by the way, the police might not necessarily be able to do. Usually, their intelligence is more of, criminal reasons, you get me? So perhaps if they want to gather information about the criminals, they do their backgrounds and and all that. But with the national security like the BNI, their main aim is to engage in counterintelligence and, of course, also gather intelligence within the country, whilst the research department does it, outside of the country. So I think that it still does matter, okay? But my issue with all of these is the number of security appointees and a seeming presence of duplication of roles. For instance, the regional security coordinator, I think it should be scrapped because it's been gradually hijacked by, party apparatus, okay? Rather, I would expect that responsibility be put in the hands of the regional security council chair, who is the regional minister. You get me? So, because when you look at they seem to be playing, they seem to be duplicating the rules. So at least we would have minimal number of persons, because the more soup the more hands you have preparing a soup, the more likely it is to spoil. In the past, we had Minister of State in charge of national security. I mean, it was a completely useless portfolio, to say the least. Then we had him move to Interior Ministry and this funny name given to him. And, all of this, I think it's just too many. And when you do that, it doesn't, and I speak as a conflicts and mediation analyst, okay? When rules are not clearly spelled out, when there's no arranged hierarchy, it's usually a recipe for confusion and diffusion. So you would have junior officers not sanctioned to take decisions which are major without full input. Just like Ayawasu West Wagon incident, it happened without the Interior Minister knowing, without the police commander for the area not knowing. Even the IGP didn't know. Someone feels he's powerful and he's highly placed, he decides to give the orders. I think we need to cut down on the numbers. There are just too many, and it's so a bane or a drain on national resources.
Adib, I thank you for making time to speak to me this morning.
Okay. Thank you.
Adib Sani is a security expert sharing his thoughts with us on the matter of the Asankregwa raid by so-called national security operatives. And,